Okay, I'm going mute, okay? You're going live.
And I can start talking, right? Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second Airport Aviation Hub webinar. Today, we're going to talk about airport management. My name is Julia Stepanovska. I'm part of the PR and marketing team at Invest in Pomerania. And Invest in Pomerania and Live More Pomerania power the Aviation Hub Pomerania initiative. This initiative was started 2 years ago. Right now, we have partners as Boeing, Lufthansa Systems, Smart for Aviation, Gdańsk Lech Wałęsa Airport, and Invest GDA. Our newest member is Cyclad. Welcome to the club. Today, we're going to talk about airport management. Our guest is Władysław Dmitriuk. Welcome, Vlad. It's really nice to have you here today with us.
Thank you,
the
Julia.
floor is yours.
All right. Let me share my screen and we will start the presentation. So if you can just please confirm that you can see my screen.
I can see your screen.
All right. Okay, let's get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Vlad and welcome to today's presentation about the airport management. This topic is going to be really exciting for those of you who are just starting your journey with aviation and also for those who have some experience there as well. My presentation is going to last approximately 50 minutes and then we will have some time for us for Q&A session. And in case you have any questions, please type them in the chat box so we can address them at the end of this presentation. Right. Let me introduce myself in more details. Who am I? Why am I the best person to talk about the airport management for the aviation hub community? I had some extensive experience in terms of aviation in general, but also in terms of airport planning and operations. One of the best achievements was to create a project of a brand new terminal building with all the exit points and all the entry points together with all the facilities for passengers and optimize the infrastructure in a way so that the airport gets the highest possible capacity of passengers there. And I did some other stuff, also including the IATA ground operation management course, which was a great experience to get to know more about the ground handling at the airport. But that's all about me. And now, guys, I just want to get to know how you are connected with aviation. And for that purpose, we will have a link in our chat boxes. So whether you are watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, there will be a link which you can open. And I just wanted to answer like a simple question. How are you connected with the aviation? And I'm gonna show the results here and we will see whom do we have on today's presentation. So if you can open the link and put your answers as A, I work at the airport, B, I work at any other aviation company, C, I'm an aviation student or just following the aviation news and articles, or D, I'm just curious about the industry itself. So please take your time and put the answers underneath the link. Okay, I see that the first answers are popping up. I will give you some time, guys. I'm really hoping to see some of my colleagues from Jeppesen, and I believe you guys are there as well. Or maybe you will be watching this later as well. So hello, everybody. All right, I see that the chart is changing. I will give you another like 1 minute or so you can still put your answers. It is all anonymous, so it's fine. So for now, I see that there are some people who work at other aviation companies. So many people who are involved with aviation, that's good. And we still have some people who are just curious about the aviation industry, and that's great. Actually, you will have a lot of things, a lot of new things today during our webinar. All right, I think we will not waste no much time for this. It was almost a perfect Pareto for 20 and 80. So thank you very much for sharing, guys. And let me come back to our presentation. All right, in terms of our today's agenda, we are going to be discussing some few general things about airport management. I wish we could have more time to discuss many aspects of aviation and airport management. But for the purpose of this presentation, we will discuss only a few topics. And maybe in the future, if you like the session, guys, there will be some other aviation hub sessions, so please stay tuned. First of all, we will really quickly talk about what is an airport, what is the book definition, what is it about. We will also go through the categorization of airports. We will briefly touch the topic of airport revenues and costs. Later, we will talk about the airport capacity and slot management, which is a really exciting topic, and it's huge, actually. Then, guys, you will have a chance to check your knowledge and do some quick exercise together with me, because we will be talking about runway configuration, and I want you to pay attention for this for that section. So later we will talk about catchment area, what is it about, how to calculate it, and stuff like that. Flying forward, we will talk about an airport manager as a career, and maybe some other things which are interesting in terms of airport management careers. And also just an added value to this presentation, what I added from my previous one was is the airport management after COVID. What changes happened during the COVID and how it influenced our industry. Right, let's get started. So what is an airport? That's a simple question, but we need to define the airport in few ways. So an airport is a defined area ashore or on the water, which includes all the necessary buildings, equipment, and machines which are so necessary for aircraft takeoff, maintenance, landing, together with all the facilities for passengers. Airports are high utilization assets. They are in use for 365 days per year, and they provide the complete range of essential services for a broad customer base. We will see who the customers of airport at some later point of time. If you think about the airport, right, if you want to look at it in terms of infrastructure, you can clearly define the airport in two main components, which is an airside and the land side. So what is an airside? Airside is a specific area which is used for aircraft operations. So for aircraft operations only, right? And there are some main components which are included in the airside. And for the purpose of this exercise, we will not be talking about navigation equipment, the ATC tower and stuff like that. Those are just the main components according to the book definition, just for you guys to remember. So the first and the main component of any airport would be the runway. A runway is usually an asphalt strip which is used for aircraft landing and takeoff. Taxiway. Taxiway is like also a strip of paved surface which is leading the aircraft from its parking place to the runway. Apron itself. Apron, we can call it as a big parking place for aircraft. It's the place where they stay next to the terminal waiting for us, passengers. And the last but not the least would be the airspace. Just for the purpose of the discussion and for those who do not know much about aviation, the airspace is all the area which is about the airport itself. And I put this image, it might not be too accurate, but this is going to be good for you to understand what airspace is. So it's also used for the aircraft operations, such as seat start procedures. When it comes to the land side, the main components would be the terminal, is the place where we as passengers move through. And I have the picture of Gdansk Lech Walesa terminal building. Parking for cars. So we had a parking for aircraft, which was an apron, and the parking for cars. It is also considered as a part of an airport itself. And also there is some transportation facilities for passengers. I will have also a diagram for you guys, maybe as a quick cheat sheet, if you want to remember through all the components of an airport system. And maybe for the next time when you go to any airport, just please take a look at this infrastructure and try to define it for yourself, where the airside ends, where the terminal begins, and when you eventually arrive at the point of your destination, how do you go to the land side, and through all those things. Maybe it's going to be interesting for you for the future. All right. Okay, this graph presents two, let's say, main of the components of the airside: the runway, which is on the left-hand side, and the taxiway. Why I want to show you this slide? First of all, it's going to be necessary for you guys to solve this quick quiz at some later point of time. But also, I want to tell more about the runway markings. So sometimes we have two strips of payments, which can be of the same size, of the same width. They can be parallel. They can be really, really close to each other. But one of them is usually a runway, and a second one would be a taxiway, which is just a parallel to that runway. And how to differentiate them? So the first thing which you might have noticed here, and for those of you guys who work in the aviation industry, it's not a big deal, but the runway has a lot of markings. It has the runway sign, let's say, the direction in which runway is facing. It has many different markings on the way. And the taxiway usually has like really simple markings, which is also in a different color. And also for the purpose of this slide, I just want to tell you that since the airport is so much dependent on its infrastructure, and the way to make the movement of aircraft faster was to build some rapid exit taxiway. So whenever the aircraft is landing, they might use a taxiway which is not 90-degree falling to the runway, but let's say 45-degree taxiway, which can expedite the aircraft movement going through the runway via the taxiway to the apron and to the parking space of that specific aircraft. So that's basically it, what I want you to know about the taxiways, which can be found at the airport. And regarding the runway, we will talk also a little bit later. Airport business models. How airport make money? Why we as passenger or airlines choose some specific airports? So first of all, I want to be talking about hub airport. What is a hub airport? A hub airport is usually an airport which serves as the turning platform for passengers. I will repeat it again. It serves as the turning platform for passengers. It means many passengers come there and then just go around to other destinations. And a hub airport has the following criteria to be defined as a hub. It is usually a home base of an airline of a large full service network carrier. It has a large number of direct flight connections. It also has high frequency of morning flights and late evening flights. Also, there is a high percentage of wide-body aircraft, so they are more convenient for a large amount of passengers. And also they have short transition time, so short transit time between different flights. And some of those airports, for example, would be Chicago O'Hare Airport, London Heathrow Airport, Dubai International, and Johannesburg. Those are the ones which you might have heard about. Secondary hub airport, they serve the same purpose, but they are usually smaller. So the examples would be the San Diego, Copenhagen, Abu Dhabi, and Nairobi airports. The destination airports. Why destination airports are so attractive to us and to the airlines? Because of their great location. Such airports as Las Vegas, Athens, and Rome Fiumicino, they just attract many people because they are located in such a beautiful places and so popular touristic destinations. Business airports would be few examples of business airport would be Van Nuys Airport in the United States and London City Airport. How to define such an airport? It's usually like a smaller airport which is accommodating smaller aircraft, and they are located in the real business heart of a city. So it's going to be really close for business people to get to their places of work or meetings and stuff like that. Low-cost airports, we've all been there. I've been there so many times, and I just love them. A few examples of low-cost airport would be the Warsaw Modern Airport and Paris Orly. And cargo airport, I mean, for us as passengers, it might not be so evident that there are some airports which are not, let's say, open for us as passengers. They are mainly focusing on cargo airlines. And few examples would be the Leipzig Airport in Germany and Memphis, which is serving as the hub base for FedEx airline, right? Okay. When it comes to the categorization of airports, so ICAO defines airport by few criteria. The first criteria would be the aeroplane reference field length, which is nothing but the runway length. The second criteria would be the aircraft wingspan, which can be accommodated on that specific runway. And the third criteria would be the outer main gear wheel span. So those are three criteria which ICAO uses by definition to define the airports, and they define them by different code number and code letters. But for the purpose of the discussion, most of you guys most probably been to the airports which is either category D or E, since they are, let's say, most common ones, and they can accommodate aircraft like Boeing 737 or stuff like that, or maybe Airbus A320. Right. We will not focus much about for this slide, but just for your general knowledge, also answering one of the quiz which we had before in our Facebook posts and also on LinkedIn posts. What is the largest airport in the world? The largest one is located in Saudi Arabia, and it's King Fahd International Airport. It's just enormous. It's huge. I was working on this airport at my previous job, and I was doing the navigational maps for this specific airport in Saudi Arabia. And it's quite difficult to understand how large it is because it's just enormous. It only has 2 runways, which are parallel. But to compare, it's like over 100,000 football fields. I know it's difficult to imagine, but it's just huge, enormous. But the general trend says that the majority of large airports are located in the United States of America. And it's no surprise since everything is big in America, right? For us, for those who live in Europe, there are 2 main airports, which are like big airports in Europe, which we all know about, would be the Amsterdam Schiphol Airport and the Frankfurt Airport. And we all know that Frankfurt is enormous, huge, and we are so stressed when we go there, right? But compared to the giants, it's quite small. It's like 3.2K football fields in size. However, the passenger, the amount of passenger which airport handles is not always related to the size of the airport. And for the couple of years, the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta Airport, which is first on the list, has been the top airport in terms of business. And it's a huge challenge to the airport management to have so many passengers there because of the security, because of the flight operations, maybe some delays, maybe some aircraft, let's say, failures or wherever. So it's a huge challenge to manage enormous airports. There is the same Frankfurt Airport on the list, and it's on the position 14. And I want you to remember this position, 14. And also there is our beautiful Gdansk Lech Walesa Airport, which I have no idea which place it was before the pandemic, and but it had almost 5 million passengers in total. Situation after the pandemic changed. So if you see those numbers right now, just please remember them roughly. And here we go. the busiest airport after the pandemic, right? I have the data for 2020 when everything changed drastically. And what I want you to remember from this slide is that the numbers have definitely changed, and also there was a market shift. So most of the flights were domestic. That's why the Chinese airports, together with the American airports, prevail the least, and because of the domestic traffic, basically. The thing is that, like, even those airports in China, which is Guangzhou International Airport or Chengdu Airport, they also had a lot of passengers in the past before the pandemic, but there was definitely a drop in the numbers. What does it mean to the airport managers? It means that we first suffer because of so low demand, and we need to adjust, we need to control our cost. And then rapidly, when the pandemic starts to decrease, we need to accommodate more passengers as well. So more staff is needed, more equipment is needed, and stuff like that. And for the regional airports, it is especially difficult because they might have had less passengers expected, but then suddenly, because of the domestic market use, they were overloaded with passengers. What is also interesting for you to know is that Frankfurt dropped to the 35th position, and the numbers are totally smaller. And our Gdansk Lech Walesa airport had almost had over 1.7 million passengers in 2020. Right, that's all about the statistic. That was not maybe the most interesting part, but just for your general information. So who are the customers of airport? Who brings money to the airport, right? There are different stakeholders connected. So first and the foremost would be the airlines. We know all about them. But also there are some categories which are not so obvious, actually. Tour operators and travel agents, they bring money to the airport. Passengers. As passengers, we not only bring money to the airlines, but also to the airports. Different tenants and concessionaires. And also visitors and employees. The funny thing regarding the visitors and the employees, sometimes people just go to the airport to chill, to have fun, maybe to relax or wherever. That's what I did during my project in Germany when I had an assignment to build a new hub and spoke system for one large airline. And instead of just sitting at the boring library, I would gather my team together and we would go to the Köln-Bonn airport and work there together. So it would give us some motivation, some aviation mood, you know. So as visitors of that airport, we were also paying for some stuff at the airport. So we also contributed to the total Köln-Bonn airport revenues. That's also what you do if you go to the airport just for fun. Okay, we say airport make money from different stakeholders, but how to define those cash flows, let's say. So first of all, there is aeronautical revenue. Aeronautical revenue is all the revenue which is connected with direct airport operations. So the majority of aeronautical revenues comes from the passenger charges and landing charges. So those are the things which airlines pay to the airports: passenger charges and landing charges. There are some other criteria. There are some other stakes of aeronautical revenue, such as terminal rentals, security charges, and others. Many different categories, but we will not go deeper. Just for your general information, that the most of the aeronautical revenues come from the airline, which is the passenger charges and the landing charges. The non-aeronautical revenue, or sometimes we call it auxiliary revenue. So auxiliary revenue is all the money which comes from non-operational side of airports. So the things which is not related to direct aircraft operations. And the funny thing is that like 50% of non-aeronautical revenues come from two categories, like retail concessions and car parking. So because of the infrastructure, the airport is making huge amount of money providing the car parking services for passenger, but also the renting space to other businesses like hotels or maybe car rentals and stuff like that. And you'll see the drop down and distribution on this chart. So food and beverage as well is like, it's a small criteria, is a small small portion of the non-aeronautical revenue, but it's still in the game. The interesting fact is that before, like, let's say when the airport started its operation, there was not so much of non-aeronautical revenue. But with the time, the trend has changed. And actually nowadays, there are plenty of airports which make more money for non-aeronautical revenues than aeronautical revenues. So non-direct things, not regarding the aircraft operations. Right. According to the Airport Council International, that's an organization which is providing some statistics and some controlling of airports. The main cost components of any average airport can be divided in two categories, which is the operating expense and capital costs. What is the operating expense? Like the most, let's say, two highest things which contribute to the operating expense would be the personal cost and the contracted services. Those are actually like the people cost, what we pay to have professionals at the airport to provide services for others, for airlines, for passengers, and for all other stakeholders. And the capital cost. Capital cost is like almost 40% of the total airport cost, and it's mostly influenced by depreciations and amortization of assets. As we know that the airport relies on its assets really a lot. And also it's about the interest expense. Since airport is a really costly infrastructure, most of the airports have a huge amount of debt and they pay the interest rate for their capital expenditures. That's why their cost of interest expense is also considerable. Interesting fact for you guys is that how to reduce some of the airport costs. I read the story that in Amsterdam airport, the cleaning costs were reduced by 7% after putting a simple fly sticker into the men's toilet. So it decreased the cost for cleaning by 7%. I have no idea how much they had to pay for those small stickers, but it was definitely a great idea and it saved them a lot of money. So even small things in terms of huge infrastructure management can influence the costs a lot. Right. Capacity and delay. So what I want to talk about the capacity is that according to the book definition, the capacity is the practical maximum number of operations which a single runway can handle. When I talk about an operation, operation can be either the aircraft takeoff or landing. So airports have different capacities and it's also depending on the infrastructure such as taxiway, availability of rapid taxiway, and the distance between the runway and the terminal. Also, regarding the book definition, we can talk about the throughput capacity, which is basically impossible to achieve. It's absolute maximum number of flights, of takeoffs and landing, which we can accommodate. That's why we always talk about the practical capacity. We consider sometimes that there might be a delay in one flight, which can cause another aircraft to be delayed as well. So the real number of operations actually drops. And just for your information, guys, on average, a single runway can accommodate around 45 operations per hour. And I have this really nice slide, which I want to explain you in more details. So you will understand why it is important to consider the practical capacity when we talk about the capacity, right? So on the x-axis, we have the number of operations, the demand, right? And on the y-axis, we have the average delay, which goes here. as the number of operations increases, let's say from 0 until 10 operations per hour, we see that there is no delay, right? There is no delay because there is enough stuff, there is enough equipment, and everything goes smoothly. However, as the number of operation increases further, let's say it increases to 30 operations per hour, right? We can see that there is a little bit of delay, which is a typical maximum acceptable delay of 4 minutes. However, if we increase the number of operations from 30, let's say, to 40, that's a small increase, so only 10 flights added. The average delay is increased like twice, even more. So the delay is increasing drastically, and sometimes it is not even worse to accommodate more flights because of the risk which delays can bring. So there will be unhappy passengers, there will be unhappy airlines, there might be some, let's say, people injuries because somebody is doing their work too fast and maybe ignoring some rules. So this exponential growth of average delay makes airport managers think about the maximum capacity which they can allow for specific runway operations. And I hope, guys, that it is really clear why this throughput capacity should never be taken into account, because it's basically impossible to achieve, and it brings a lot of risk into the picture. Also, just for your general information, the world record of the world record of maximum number of operations which was registered, it was registered in Mumbai airport in India. It's like a single runway airport, and there were 969 operations over 24 hours. That's like 40 operations per hour. That's a lot for a single runway. And I imagine how difficult it was to handle all those flights. All right, sorry. So when it comes to the slot allocation, so for those of you who are not familiar about what the aviation slot is, it's basically the airline's permission to use a specific time for a specific operation at the airport. It can be, let's say, 8 in the morning permission to take off from Frankfurt Airport. So a single airline is granted this permission to have their operation at 8 in the morning at Frankfurt Airport. And in case they want to have this permission, because it's not actually so easy to get so attractive slot at Frankfurt Airport because it is so busy. If they want to keep this permission for future, for the next 6 months period, because usually slots are allocated for 6 months in advance to make the scheduling possible. If they want to keep this permission, they will need to use this specific slot for 80 or more % of the times. So let's say, just in case of any kind of strike, let's say, and the airline was not able to use that specific slot 80% of the times within 6 months period, they will need to they will just lose simply this ability for the next 6 months period, and somebody else can take it. So this basically is called the grandfather rule in slot allocation. And there are some other ways to allocate the slot to an airline operator or to any other let's say entity. But we will not go really deep into that, because you will guys have a material which I will share with you. So if you want, you can read more about the criteria for slot allocation if you're really interested in this topic, because it's a huge one and it will take us a lot of time to proceed. Right, are you ready? So I want you to really focus right now and to remember a few things which will help you to solve the quiz which we'll have afterwards. Runway configurations. We have different possible runway configuration, and I will tell you why it is so important to have them all. I will zoom it for you as well, but for now, I just want you to understand that the runway is, the airport is really dependent on its infrastructure. And if nobody can use this infrastructure, it's the waste of money, right? So the airport wants to ensure that the airlines have all the possibility to use the airport at any time, also at any weather. And since we are so much dependent on weather, especially in the wind, the airports try to adjust to the weather by having different runway configurations in place to prevent such situation when the takeoff or the landing was declined because of a really strong crosswind component at the airport. So what are the main configurations of the runway? Starting from the first one, it's really simple. It's a single runway configuration. There is nothing to talk about, just one runway and the terminal building. The parallel runway configuration. That would be like a terminal would be in the middle, and there are two parallel runways available at the airport. When you see like more than, let's say, two or maybe sometimes two runways which are not parallel and they intersect each other, we just call them simply intersecting runways. And if they do not intersect, we call them non-intersecting runways. We will see examples of such configurations at our quiz. The next category would be the open V runway. That's not so oftenly seen, but I will also give you some examples. And we can say that there are converging open V runways and diverging open V runways. It's just sometimes it's much better to have the landings on one runway and takeoff from another one. Like the majority of them are distributed this way. And when it is like really difficult for you guys to understand what kind of configuration it is, we just simply are gonna call them the combination runways, right? Okay, so I hope you were able to remember a few of those configurations. And let's try this exercise. So what I want you to do is that I want you to take a look at this screenshot of the Google Maps and to count the number of runways and try to decide which runway configuration it is, while I take a nice sip of water. So calculate how many runways you see here. And remember about the runway markings, which I mentioned before, that how to define the runway from the taxiway. Okay. I hope, guys, you were able to identify two runways here. It's the London Heathrow Airport, and it has a parallel runway system. The next one, it's going to be quite easy. Okay, so I hope, guys, that you found this single runway at Gdańsk Lech Walesa Airport, and most of us have been there, so we know how it looks like. Let's go further. This one is quite complicated, and maybe I will also zoom it for you. Just a quick tip. It's not going to be easy, maybe, but for those of you who work in the aeronautical navigation, just like I did, it's quite easy to identify those runways, and maybe you even know what airport it is. It's like the largest airport in Turkey, and it is in Istanbul. So at this point of time, it had 4 runways, so 2 sets of parallel runways, sorry for that. But right now it's expanding and it's adding more runways on the western side, on the eastern side, actually. All right, let's go next. One of my favorite airports, where I spent so much time. All right, I hope you were able to identify 3 runways here. and it's the Köln-Bonn airport, so we can call it this runway configuration as the intersecting runways. The next one, similar example. And please also look for some smaller runways here as well. So I hope you were able to identify at least 2 runways, but there is also like a third one, small runway for general aviation aircraft. And it's also the intersecting runways at the intersecting runway at Central Illinois Regional Airport. This one, it's another airport in Turkey, in Istanbul. So how many runways? So there are 3 runways here available. There was some issue with one of the runway closure, but at this point of time we have 3 runways, and it's the example of open V runway configuration. And that's like a boss of all the airports in the world. I will not actually make you count all the runways here because it's quite difficult. We have the example of Denver International Airport, and it has 6 runways here, and we just call it a combination runway system, right? Okay, good. I hope that you guys had some fun solving those exercises. Regarding the catchment area of an airport is actually an area from which it attracts its passengers. There are a couple of factors which influence the catchment area of any airport. The most important ones would be the location, of course, of the airport and the ease of communication. So how far it is from the place where you live and how easy it is to get to that airport. Also, it is important for the airport to have its, let's say, public image, its prestige, so that everybody knows about the existence of this airport, and the availability of different destinations, which is so important for us as passengers to choose that specific airport. The catchment area is interesting topic. I did some research as well when we had to compare the airport competition in Krakow and Katowice. So it's a huge topic and it requires a lot of time to calculate this catchment area. In theory, it's easy to understand, but in practice, there are so many things which are included in the catchment area calculation that it's a huge new topic, right? All right, we have 2 more sections, guys. So rise and shine, get some energy, and we are ready to take off. Now we will talk about the airport manager as the career. What are the key skills and traits of an airport manager? Any airport manager should have a great business and administrative ability. Decision making should be quick, and it should be, let's say, beneficial for the airport image and for the airport operations, for the profitability. One of the most important skill of an airport manager would be the coordination and delegation, since airport is such a complicated infrastructure and it requires a lot of work. The good airport manager should be able to delegate the duties and coordinate the work within the airport. Negotiations, that's also really important. Finance and economy, of course, at any managerial position, it's important to remember about the financial side of the business, and as well as business and aviation law. So personally, I might not become like the best airport manager because the aviation law, it is super complicated. It is also really difficult for a general person to understand all of those terminology. But I think it is an exciting job to have the airport. What if airport management, it's so complicated for you, but maybe you want to connect yourself with the airport somehow? There are many different things which are available at the airport. So a station manager is like a person who represents a specific airline at a specific airport. We call it a station of an airline, and a station manager is responsible for profitable and safe operations at the specific airline station. Air traffic controller, I had a pleasure to talk with some really experienced guys from Poland who work at the air traffic controller at different smaller airports in Poland. And I think that job is really amazing. It has so many advantages in terms of scheduling and in terms of in terms of communication as well, but also it is really challenging. Sales associate, the airport has so many customers, and especially those who are renting the space of an airport. They need to have some kind of person to be their contact point from the airport side. So sales associate at the airport, it could be also interesting job for somebody to try. And a slot coordinator, of course, that's a huge responsibility, and maybe you can consider this stuff in the future. Okay, guys, we have one more section to go. We are really ready for takeoff and also for your questions. I hope you have some questions, so you can put them in the chat box so we can address them later as well. Airport management after COVID. So since the COVID influenced many things in aviation, airports had to adjust as well. First of all, there was a huge change of expectation and needs for passengers. That's why the airports had to react, and they had to change their infrastructure accordingly. And one of the huge challenges for airport manager was to accommodate more people, more personnel at the airport. Would be like a medical personnel in a terminal. They need to go through the security checks and all this stuff. The more people, also it makes the management more complicated. However, I see many positive changes which happened to the airport management after the COVID. One of the things which happened to airports after COVID was introduction of new technologies for automated screening, and it actually expedited the passenger movement at the terminal. Airports had to implement new cleanliness standards in response to our changing needs. Actually, it decreased other illnesses spread across the airport as well. And one of the things which also changed was some airports introduced biometric systems to recognize passengers using the facial recognition system. And it actually reduced the passenger handling time in general. Those are the positive changes, and I want you guys to stay positive about even some negative things which are happening around. Just like airports need to adjust. And basically that would be all from my side. And I also prepared the small bonus for you guys. There is a list of materials which you can go and check out. And if I were you, and if I wanted to know more about the airport management, I would start with the wonderful book which I read myself. It's the Young Seth's book called Airport Planning and Management. And it's just gonna give you so much insight about the airport management. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please address them to me and we can continue the discussion. Thank you, guys.
Vlad, thank you so much. That was really fascinating and encouraging. So right now we have a couple of minutes for our Q&A session.
Yeah.
Right now we have some answers to the questions you've already asked. So if you can have a look in the chat box, I can also read it out to you.
Yeah, if you can read it.
Yeah, so it's related to the first part of our quiz. So there was one answer related to the first question. I'm not 100% sure if this is the correct pronunciation, but it says to RWY parallel. I believe that was related to the parallel airport plan, airport scheme. If you could address.
Yeah, let me stop sharing and I will take a look at the answer for the first one. 2 runway parallel. Yeah, I mean, this is like 2 runways which are parallel. That's totally correct. Airport. I mean, the Heathrow Airport.
Perfect.
Taturk, the new one. Yeah. That's the Taturk one. And those were the question in our chat, right?
Yes. There is also another question coming from the participants. So if I can read it out to you.
Yeah.
How do airports handle peak hours? if you could share any
Yeah,
insights.
I can share some insights. So as we mentioned before, we have like a really limited infrastructure. We cannot expand the infrastructure so easily. And also we have a limited amount of people and machines which can be available at a specific point of time. So that's why airports need to balance. If, for example, it's just a general supply-demand curve for those of you who learned economics. So the higher the demand, the higher the prices if the supply stays the same. So airports put higher prices for most attractive time slots. So the early morning flights and the late evening flights, which are sometimes so convenient for us, for passengers, and also for the airlines, are much more expensive. So those time slots are much more expensive compared to the ones which is like a 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. Flight slot. So they try to, let's say, balance out and fence out the airline carriers which cannot pay much money to have their slot a little bit later at some less attractive time. So that's the answer for your question. It would be just to put the higher prices for the most attractive slots to shift the demand to the time when it is, let's say, cheaper for the airlines to have the slot. I hope it was clear explanation.
Thank you. So there is also another question. Do you know what is the difference between towing and pushback procedures?
Yeah, I mean, I had some experience back at Jeppesen. Basically, towing of aircraft, right? We have different machineries like a tow tractor, which can have a tow bar, or it can be a barless truck. It can just simply pick up the aircraft front wheel and carry it. So it's not really related to, in general, to, let's say, to our topic, but I also have I have another presentation of the ground handling, which is also based on my IATA ground operations management course. And it can actually answer your question, maybe if we can make the session in the future. There is no like fine line, and I cannot tell right now how to differentiate towback procedure from the pushback procedure. They are basically the same. They serve the same purpose, to move the aircraft from its parking position to the place where it can maneuver by itself. So towing basically is used in the tow, the actual tow, and a pushback is just the general terminology. I hope it can give you some insights, but as I mentioned before, there can be a better explanation if we go through the ground handling procedures.
Thank you. So I also have a question related to your experience, your IATA certificate. Could you tell us something more about the process of getting the certificate? What it actually what are the benefits of getting this certificate?
Well, I think that having, let's say, going through IATA course gives you a lot of insight about aviation, especially if you wanna learn hard, because the certificate itself is just a confirmation that you passed the examination. And I believe they have quite a high percentage required to pass the examination. I believe it's like more than 75 or more than 80% of answers should be correct. And if you want to get like a certificate with some extra remark, extra reward, you need to have like 95% of the correct responses. The time to pass the examination is really short. There are so many questions. You need to know the answers by heart, and you need to understand some things really, really well. But in general, it was quite an intense course. I had it like for 4 months in total. And I had the instructor, which is the certified instructor from IATA, who was telling us more insights. And we also had the huge book, which is like 400 something pages. How is it like to be a station manager at the airport? It had all the different aspects of ground handling, of IATA ground standard ground handling agreements, and a lot of law, a lot of operations. So it was really exciting stuff. And if you guys ever want to check out more about the IATA examinations, you can go to their webpage, and there is information about their certifications and examinations. Maybe for some of you who are in the business itself, it can be helpful just to prove your skills and maybe go to higher in your position.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe there are no more questions, no list. Please give me 1 second. All right, so this is your last chance to ask your questions. We have our expert online. If there are any other topics you're interested in, please send us an email and we'll try to address the question with our expert later on. So far, I think we've answered all the questions. So, Vlad, thank you once again.
Thank you, Julia, for having me here.
That was really, really fascinating.
Great.
So hopefully see you soon. Please check out our social media profiles for new events and new initiatives. Get involved and let's stay in touch.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julia. Have a good